Welcome back to the Pack and Clint show here on Total Coverage Sports. I really appreciate you guys being here with us on a Tuesday. We had a really good week this past week. We obviously had the conference championships. We now have the bracket set. Clint and I are going to touch on the bracket in a little bit. But first, before we do that, we're gonna talk about some of the conference championships. We'll talk about what happened in those games, give you guys a full recap. I watched all those games. I watched the all 22 of all those games. So I've got some notes for you guys if anyone's wondering why and what happened and some of the reasons behind it. I'll give you some of that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the all SEC teams. Texas has, I think, something like 7 people who made the all SEC team. So we're going to give some shout outs there. But before we do any of that, please like, subscribe, comment, retweet, go follow Total Coverage on X, follow Ghost on X, follow the Total Coverage YouTube channel, follow Clint's Twitter at NBA Hornboy, follow me at Pack Talks XO. We really appreciate your guys' support. Clint, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Had a lot of good games this week. A lot of them went about how we expected them to, and it's cool that we're finally in the postseason now. Love Bowl and college football playoff season, so it's always a fun time.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite times of the year. I think last week I said conference championship is my favorite week, or it's my favorite Saturday of the entire year because you get 3 or 4 really, really good games back to back. Bowl season is probably my favorite month because you have a game pretty much every day, and not all of them are teams that you've ever heard of or that you know anything about. So it's always a really fun experience just to watch those teams and figure out what they're doing and kind of get a better idea for what's going on and being able to see different teams and just explore what's going on there. We got a couple bowl games that I'm really excited about, including Texas, Michigan, in the Citrus Bowl. I'm sure you and I will talk about that a little bit more in the weeks to come this week. Probably not, just because there's still a lot of things that are going on, including the transfer portal. Texas made a couple of staff changes today, and so there's some other stuff that's going on that will take away from the Texas Michigan game. So we'll wait to break that one down. But all in all, a really fun month coming up, culminating in the first round games, which are just about 10 days away and 11 days away, and then getting into the full swing of the playoffs. So a really good time to be here. You and I do a really good job of breaking teams down and breaking these games down. I think we pretty much nailed every single game. So you gotta, I think we did a really good job with that. So
Yeah, if you're ready, I think we can start on the first game, which was the Big 12 championship between Texas Tech and BYU, a rematch of the regular season, where Texas Tech in that first matchup ended up coming out victorious with a 29-7 victory. And from what I remember, when we both were predicting the game last week, we both predicted that we could very likely see a even worse beating than we saw in the regular season, and we saw exactly that. We saw a higher score margin. Result ended up being 34-7 in favor of Texas Tech, and it was just about what we expected, a beatdown of BYU. BYU, that whole entire maybe that first like quarter or something, they looked like they could compete, but after that, that defense just created so many turnovers. Namely, Ben Roberts had a day himself with the 2 crazy interceptions that he had. Which, in my opinion, were the 2 game changers. You had the one where it was right in front of him and he tipped it up to himself. And then you had the other one where Bachmeier was throwing down the middle and he one-handed that ball Odell Beckham style. So, I mean, it was just a great game overall for Tech. Offense-wise, they did better than I thought they were going to do. Barry Morton is looking more and more like his pre-injury self. And then you have the defense, which this whole entire year they've been lights out which it still baffles me just with how Tech's been our entire lives. They've probably like the antithesis of having a good defense is what they're known for. They've had a horrible defense our whole life, and now they're one of the best in the country. So it was just about what I expected, and yeah, it was just a great game overall from Tech, and unfortunately, that kicked BYU out of the playoff.
Yeah. So you're right. We both did think that this had the potential to be even worse of a game than the first one. And I think it kind of came down to what we thought was going to happen. And it's just the fact that BYU could not block the Texas Tech front, right? They were able to get pressure with four consistently. And then, like you said, their linebackers made a lot of really big plays. Ben Roberts had the two interceptions. I think another linebacker forced a fumble too. So they did a lot of things to create havoc for the Texas Tech defense, and especially once Bachmeier's ankle got rolled up on and he couldn't walk, or he couldn't run the way he wants to. You could kind of tell that he was just a sitting duck, and with that offensive line, you can't be a sitting duck against what's maybe the best defensive line and maybe the best front seven in the entire country. So once Bachmeier got hurt, the game was over. I think everyone kind of knew once he got hurt that it was only a matter of time, because Tech was going to hit some explosives. They were going to figure something out offensively, and when you don't have any mobility, and that's one of your biggest strengths as a quarterback, you're in some deep water when you face a team like Texas Tech. And then offensively, I thought Morton played well. He played a lot better than he did the first time around. First time around, you and I came away thinking that he was a real liability for them. I think on Saturday it was more of a neutral, where you don't necessarily think you don't think he's good enough to win a national title if a team makes Baron Morton beat them. But if he can play as a game manager and make a couple throws a game, if Texas Tech can live with that, they'll be fine. For BYU, I know you mentioned that they were out of the playoff. I just didn't think they were a playoff team. I'm not sure that they were a top 15 team in the country, because defensively they're good. They do a lot of different things. They play quarters. They play cover three. They'll show you cover two. They're pretty creative in terms of their pressure paths, but the problem for them is when they can't run the ball, it's really anemic offensively, and that's not a team that's going to have much success in the playoff, even if they did make it. So that was kind of my main takeaway. Texas Tech kind of did what I thought they would do. I've had them pegged as a top five team for about 2 months now. They keep proving that right. I'm interested to see what it looks like against Oregon, because Oregon's got a lot of team speed, and that's something that BYU hasn't really seen just yet. But that'll be something that we can get into at a later date.
Yeah, and just one more point I want to touch on, which I kind of already touched on it a bit, but this is one of those games where you can look at the team stats and you can look at this one part, and without even knowing the score or knowing anything else, you see this one stat and you know who ended up winning the game. BYU ended up with 4 turnovers at the end of the game, and Texas Tech ended up with none. And that ended up ultimately being the biggest factor in the game were the turnovers that Tech were able to create. Other than that, Coy Eakin had a big day, 2 touchdowns, and then Reggie Virgil having one of his biggest games of the season so far. So yeah, they looked probably one of the most complete games they've had. And when you talk about quality opponent that they've played,
Yeah. Really quick question I got. Thought on the Texas linebacker entering the portal. Which
Wisconsin.
linebacker are we talking about? Are we talking about Mesa, or if you give me a name, I can give you an answer, but I don't remember anyone of significance from the Wisconsin roster entering the portal, because the two really good linebackers haven't entered yet. If you're talking about the Curtis kid, he's fine. I don't think it's going to be someone that Texas is in on. Uh, that's not. I wouldn't plan on that. The two really good linebackers for Wisconsin are Mesa and the other one I'm forgetting, but he's also stud. I don't imagine either of those two entering the portal. So,
If
but
you're ready to move
yeah,
on to
we
the
can
next
move
game.
on to the Big Ten championship. So I'll let you go first because I have quite a bit of notes and it might take a little bit of time. So I don't want to bore you. I'll let you say what you need to, and then I'll go on my spiel.
Yeah, so this was a game where we both ended up getting it wrong and both predicted Ohio State to win, just because it's one of those situations where you kind of have to see before you're gonna believe it. As Ohio State's been pretty dominant this whole year in most of their games, other than Texas, where it was a very close game and Texas outgained them, but they came away victorious at the end. They've been very dominant. Now, granted, was a lot of that due to a very weak strength of schedule that they have in the Big Ten? Yeah, I mean, I think most people would say it was, but also they're a very good team too. And also, Indiana was in the same situation. They had one really good game against Oregon, where that's a really quality opponent, the number 5 seed in the playoff right now. But other than that, they weren't really battle tested besides that one game. And seeing how Indiana did, and what I was most impressed with was how Indiana did defensively. Um, I thought that that was going to be somewhat of a defensive game, but I didn't expect Indiana to create so much pressure on Sayan and make him see ghosts for a lot of the game. To be quite frank, right there, it's just I was just very impressed. That game proved to me that they're definitely a team that I think could win it all. They're definitely a serious team, not just a team that's been benefiting off of an easy schedule and had a one good fluke game. They're the real deal. Fernando Mendoza, despite the 13 points, he played pretty solid in my opinion. Um, and at the start, it almost looked like that O line was going to get bullied all day, because even on the runs where they were getting positive plays, even on the pass they're getting positive plays, that O line was just getting pushed back every single play on those first couple of drives. But uh, Indiana's defense ended up keeping them in the game, and that one late touchdown on the back shoulder to Surratt ended up being the game winning touchdown at the end. Ohio State unfortunately ended up losing because of a 27-yard field goal. I think it was 27 yards. And if that game goes to overtime and he makes that, who knows what happens, but that's why you play the game. So you got to play a complete game to win a conference championship, especially when you're playing a quality opponent like Ohio State or Indiana. You have to be very sound, very disciplined, and just executing well on all sides of the ball. You can't just rely on one side and expect to win. So impressive win by Indiana. Best season in their school history, being the second losingest program in college football history, and then in year 2 under Kurt Signetti going 13-0 and winning a Big Ten championship. That's one of the most impressive coaching turnarounds I've ever seen in my life, and I probably will ever see in my life. So props to Indiana. Ended up getting that 1 seed, and we'll see how Ohio State bounces back from this game. We saw how they bounced back, even though it wasn't a conference championship game. How they lost to Michigan in their regular season finale. So I'm interested to see how both these teams respond from this, and yeah, see how far both of them go.
Yeah, so I'll start off by talking about the Indiana offense because I thought you did because you did a good job of mentioning some of the things that I thought early on watching the game when Mendoza first played the game gets uh, annihilated by Caden Curry on just a naked boot where Caden Curry ends up slipping a tackle and blasts Mendoza. After that, it kind of you maybe got the impression that this was that the Indiana offensive line was going to have a hard time. And it wasn't like Mendoza was living in completely clean pockets, but he wasn't operating out of super muddy pockets, right? He was able to get to a 3-step drop and get the ball out off a hitch. It wasn't where it was 3-step and there's automatically pressure. So he did a better. Indiana's offensive line did a good job of giving him enough time. And then so last week, and especially in the chats, I talked about some of the things that concerned me about this game for Indiana. And the first one that I talked about was the lack of creativity in the run game. They generally haven't been super diverse in terms of what they're running, right? If you go back and you watch the Iowa tape and you go back and watch the Wisconsin tape, it's really basic in terms of run scheme. It's a lot of inside zone, duo, and then when they want to get the ball in the perimeter, it's pin and pull. There wasn't a whole lot of gap scheme. There wasn't much counter power. They didn't run many hat plays where they were running insert or ISO. It was a lot of just it just wasn't a whole lot of creativity, right? It was a lot of we're going to beat you to the spot. We're going to be more technical than you, and so we're going to do a better job of blocking than you can do of displacing us, and that you can do of striking and shedding us. That was a big thing that I noticed, especially against some of these lower competition teams for Indiana. That wasn't the case on Saturday. One of the biggest runs that Indiana had was actually on a power play where they've got the tight end on the ball into the boundary. So, and then what they do is they pull the field side guard and they run power. And what it did was it allowed them to seal that front side tackle or the front side defensive end, and Blackett then ends up getting like 40 yards on the play. And it's a good job of blocking it up. There's a misfit in there by one of the Ohio State linebackers, but that was the type of thing that you hadn't seen a whole lot of from Indiana throughout the year. And I think we saw this against Texas quite a bit, where counter, and you saw it against Michigan, and you even saw it a little bit against some of the other teams that they've played. Ohio State hasn't done the best job of playing against gap scheme, and in particular, OY and OT counter against closed sets. And when I say closed sets, I mean the side where the tight end is on, that's the closed side. So if the tight end's to the left, you get a closed left call. So they had a really hard time all year, pretty much, of figuring out how to fit, because they're a one gap fit team, which just means that each player is in charge of one gap, which is not something that Georgia or Alabama or a lot of teams do, where they'll two gap some things and they'll change the math up in order to be able to play different coverage structures and not have to play single high all the time. But what it meant for Ohio State was they had a really hard time of fitting gap scheme. They had a really hard time of fitting counter, and I think you saw that on Saturday, where Indiana had a lot of success running counter, and that's not something that they've run a whole lot of this year. It's something that you, quite frankly, you gotta give them a lot of credit for, because it was one of my concerns for them. I didn't think they were going to be creative enough in the run game to actually stress the Ohio State linebackers and the Ohio State defensive line, and they did exactly that. And then the second thing that I talked about with the Indiana offense was the pass game. I said they were going to need to be able to hit those out routes, those fade routes, the RPO slant, RPO glance stuff, because that is a lot of what their offense is, right? They run a lot of spacing concepts. They run a lot of Hank concepts. And a Hank concept is running a deep out with the two and a go with the one. They run some smash in there. They run chop occasionally, and chop is just the one and the three running hitch routes or running out routes, basically option routes, and the number two running a corner or running a slot fade, dependent on the leverage. And so, just generally, I thought they weren't going to be creative enough in the pass game to to stress the Ohio State secondary. And again, this wasn't like they were super complex in terms of their passing game. It wasn't, but they hit an out route. They hit their out routes. Mendoza hit the go balls. Obviously, the one to Charlie Becker to end the game. We all remember the post that he hit for the right before the touchdown to Charlie Becker. The slot fade to Surratt for the touchdown. Right, so they hit their big plays when they needed to. Um, and the slot fade was a really good ball. It was against cover one. Ohio State did frankly a poor job of disguising there. They didn't even disguise. They showed single high pre snap. They showed press man pre snap. And part of the problem when you face a team like Indiana, who loves throwing back shoulder balls, is if you give them a clear indication that you're going to play press man in the red zone, they will almost certainly run some variation of a slot fade or some variation of a smash route. And that's what they did, and they got a touchdown out of it. So give them credit there. And I mean, I think you have to say that they did a good job in terms of Indiana. I mean, they did a really good job of just scoring enough, right? It wasn't like their offense had a ton of success, but they didn't need to. When you have a defense as good as they do, you don't need to score a lot. And it turned out 13 points was all they needed, and they got to that. So give them a lot of credit there. But again, not a super creative offense, right? They don't run a whole lot of motion. They don't bunch a whole lot, and that could be something that maybe gets them into trouble later on in the playoff. But it didn't on Saturday, and in large part that's due to the defense, which I'll get to in a second. And then for Ohio State defensively, Sonny Styles was tremendous. I'm sure if you look his name up on Twitter, you can find a 2-minute cut up of him against Indiana, and it's really good tape from a stack fit perspective because traditionally Ohio State plays a lot of penny fronts. And if you don't know what a penny front is, that's having 5 defensive linemen and then having 1 linebacker behind them. And so the 1 linebacker ends up stack fitting because everyone else is playing as a 1 gap player. So he'll stack behind either the 3 technique or the nose. And whatever side the ball goes to, he'll fit one of those gaps. So if the ball ends up working to the backside B gap, he'll start in the front side A gap and he'll work all the way to the backside B gap. And he just throughout the entire game, Sonny Styles just continuously did an incredible job of fitting the run. Arvell Reese, you didn't really hear his name called out much, and to me, that's just largely because he's not a great linebacker yet. He's really good off the edge, and that wasn't really something that they let him do a whole lot of. He didn't rush the passer much on Saturday, and a part of that is just because Fernando Mendoza does have athleticism, right? He can scramble, and so a lot of the time they were using him as a spy, and that's a good job of Indiana because it basically took Arvell Reese out of the game, and that's a guy who's going to be a top 5 pick in the draft in April. So again, a really good job of Indiana in terms of figuring out ways to scheme out Arvell Reese, and then doing a good job of attacking single high. They're a team that naturally has a lot of concepts that are going to beat cover 1 and cover 3, and you saw that on Saturday. You can maybe point some fault at Ohio State for they really were very single high heavy on Saturday, and you can maybe say that's a problem where you'd want them to have more split safety stuff in there, maybe more Tampa, try to disguise a little bit more than they did, especially knowing that they can, right? Because we saw that Texas game plan, and it was a lot of disguising. It was a lot of different coverages that you could see, and that clearly fooled Arch Manning. And I don't know that I thought Mendoza was fooled very often on Saturday. Again, credit to him. He's going to be a top 5 pick in the draft. So you kind of come to expect those things with really high level quarterback play. And then switching over to the other side of the ball with the Indiana defense, I wrote it in a chat. If Indiana can stop the run and get Ohio State consistently into 3rd and 5 plus, they were going to have Julian Sayin in hell. And the reason I said that was because Brian Haynes does a tremendous job of attacking protections. The very first play of the game, they run just basic cover 3. The second play of the game, they ran a fire zone. And then the third play of the game, they ran a non traditional Tampa 2. So I think they showed single high pre snap, and then they rolled the single high safety to be the middle run through player or the pole runner. And then they had 2 guys end up spinning back to deep halves. And what ended up happening was Julian Sayin he didn't see the middle run through player, and so he throws a hook route, and the middle run through player ends up picking it off. And that was just a continuous theme of the game to me for Indiana, was how often Julian Sayin was confused, where he didn't know what he was watching, he didn't know what he was looking at, and it wasn't like the pressure path was super unique. Now, the presentation of it was, but it was just a Newton pressure, which is a field. It was a Newton sprint pressure, which is a B gap insert from the field side safety or the field side star. In this case, it was a Sam linebacker, number 46. I think his name is Isaac Jones. But it's a really good call by Brian Haynes, and you saw it a lot on Saturday. Indiana found a ton of success with nickel pressures or with Sam pressures, where they were bringing him off, where they were bringing a star or a nickel or an outside linebacker off the edge. They got a sack in the red zone doing exactly that, where Saint ends up scrambling to the sideline and gets chased down. They got another sack on a fire zone where Ohio State was trying to hit. If everyone remembers the Oregon game in the uh, in the quarterfinals at the Rose Bowl last year, they start Jeremiah Smith in the slot and they're trying to run a post with him, and they can't get to it. It was run for a touchdown last year, but they couldn't get to it this year because uh, they Indiana ends up bringing a fire zone, and the deep third corner does a tremendous job of bailing and getting depth. Because what happened last year with Oregon was they were also in cover three, but Oregon's deep third corner was sunk because they ran a dig or they ran a hook curl, a hook route, and so the corner didn't get depth and he didn't get width on his divider. That didn't happen on Saturday, where the Indiana corner gets depth and gets width. And so you take away the post from Jeremiah Smith, and then you're able to get a sack out of it. And so stuff like that, where they're really well schooled, they understood the concepts, they knew what they were doing. Speaking of knowing what they were doing, Ohio State, if again they ran the same play twice that they ran against Oregon for touchdowns, where they ran GT counter with Travion Henderson and it went for about 60 yards. And if you remember, before during that play, they ran rocket motion with, I think at the time it was Carnell Tate. So they ran rocket motion and they ran OY counter, and that hit for a touchdown. And that was only after their first touchdown, where they ran a slide route with Jeremiah Smith, where they ran rocket motion. They showed counter one way, and then they threw the drop off to the slide route, and Jeremiah Smith scored. They tried to do that again against Indiana, and it went for -3 yards on the slide play. So that's just being really well schooled. That's a tremendous job by Brian Haynes, getting those guys ready. It's a great job by their secondary, understanding how to handle motion, because that is something that a lot of teams have struggled with this year. Rocket motion, orbit motion, figuring out how to handle this different stuff, whether you're going to be a spin team, a slingshot team, sliding, whatever your motion check is. Indiana did a great job of handling that stuff. And then for Ohio State, I thought, especially in the second half, you could tell that they were trying to get Sain out of the pocket, where they were trying to roll him and try to give him little dump downs. You saw Max Clare had a lot of receptions off of this. Their tight ends had a lot of receptions off of that. And I think in large part it's because he had no idea what he was seeing. He didn't trust it. Like you said, he was seeing ghosts. So a great job by Indiana in terms of figuring out ways to confuse, saying not only on third down, but on first and second down. And then he did a really good job of attacking protections. Haynes, they ran a lot of big on big protection, and what you see teams do when you get big on big protection is they'll show in a bear front, right? Because then everyone's going to take the man in front of them, and then what you can do is you can run a lot of loops, you can run a lot of twists, because that beats man protection. You saw them do that. You saw them once Ohio State got into more jet or slide protection. You saw them blitz off the edge to the open slide side. So just a really good pressure plan from Brian Haynes. It was a really good game just by Indiana in general. I think it answered a lot of questions for me too. Like, I'm firmly ready to call them a national title contender. And yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. We can move on to the last game we'll be recapping. Georgia versus Alabama, another rematch from earlier this season, where Alabama went into Athens, and I think the final score was 24-14, if I'm correct. I think it was somewhere around there. But this game was the complete opposite of what that was in in Sanford Stadium. Georgia completely dominated Alabama from start to finish. Final score 28-7. The final score, in my opinion, is a lot closer than the game felt or the game looked if you watched it. You can start off if you want.
Yeah, so um, it was 24-21 the first game. I'm just remembering that, but this was another game where a defensive coordinator had a tremendous day in terms of protections, in terms of attacking protections. So just like Ohio State, Alabama, in terms of third down, had really two plans in terms of what they were going to do in terms of their protection. They were going to run jet protection, which means that they were either going to give a Ringo or a Lucky call. So they were going to slide four to whatever the side was. If it was Ringo, you're sliding four to the right. If it's Lucky, you're sliding four to the left, and you're going big on big opposite that. And what you saw Georgia do was they completely dictated what Alabama was going to do in terms of their protection plans. So Georgia would show a bear front, and they knew they would get big on big protection. So what would they do? They would run a twist path. You saw this on what they want on a Falcons load front, where they had their bigs to the field and they showed three guys into the boundary, and all three were linebackers. And they dropped two of the backers, two of the bigs ended up stunting inside, and Zayden Walker ends up twisting, and he works himself into the open B gap. And Ty Simpson's forced to rush a throw, and it's incomplete. It ended up going about 10 yards over the head of Latsier Brooks. So that's one example of them attacking slide protection or attacking big on big protection, man protection. Then you saw them get into they attacked slide protection with safety blitzes. They ended up running what's called a Sonics pressure. And Sonics is bringing the Sam linebacker and the safety to the Sam linebacker side. The Sam ends up blitzing B gap, and the safety is going to blitz C gap or D gap if there's a tight end attached. And they ended up getting a sack on that because they end up sliding away, and then Daniel Hill is forced to take both of the Sam and the safety. He takes the Sam. Ja'Cory Thomas is free and he ends up sacking Ty Simpson. And this was funny enough. They ran the same pressure on back-to-back plays. On second down, they ran an eyes pressure, so they went three deep, two under. And then on third down, they ran a two trap pressure, which is Sonics. And so not only was it Georgia was able to dictate what protection Alabama was going to play, but when they figured out what protection they were going to play and they liked a path, they weren't stagnant, they weren't static in terms of the coverages. They ran something like 15 different paths. Like they ran a lot of different pressure paths, but they ran at least two different coverages behind every single path. One example of that is they ran what's called bow, and that's a cover zero pressure. Cover zero for Georgia is cover one, no rat. So there's no rat player, but what that means is it's a five-man pressure, and so the boundary backer is going to blitz the C gap. He's going to loop to the C gap, and they ran that path, but then they followed it up by running what's known as boomer. And so that's playing cover zero to the boundary, but then it's playing cover seven to the field. And on one snap, when they ran boomer, they ran Seahawk, which is a cover seven, 3/2 check. And then the next one, they ran box, which is a bunch check, where it's someone's got the first in, first out, first deep and out, first deep and in. And so they were super multiple in terms of their coverages, even when they showed the same path. They ran a lot of different things. That you even saw them show some three high, and when they were in three high, you saw them do it out of a double G front, which means that they had double two eyes and then double fives, and then both of their linebackers were playing out in 50s. And so that was something that Oklahoma did to Alabama late in the game, and they did a lot of really good stuff there too. But just a really creative and a really good game plan by Clint Schumann that clearly had Ty Simpson flustered. He had a really hard time figuring out what he was looking at, and it's kind of what it was.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said there. One thing that I was just looking at that I find really interesting. If you watched it, it sums up the game. It sums up a lot of the game for you. Alabama only got past the 50-yard line once until the fourth quarter, and that one drive they threw an interception 2 plays later. I mean, that offense was completely stuck the entire time, and the offense was stumped, and Georgia was just able to cause mayhem everywhere. They were able to get stops at will. Alabama just couldn't do anything. Missing Jam Miller just completely hurt a lot, even though they already didn't have much of a run game as it was this year. Having him was just it ended up killing them at the very end. They ended up finishing with -1 rushing yard or -3 rushing yards. Granted, some of that was sacks taking into place, but yeah. Other than that, I don't really have too much to say about this. Georgia did what I thought they were going to do. I had them winning the game, and I thought that they were going to come out guns a-blazing. As we discussed last week, that both teams were on 2 totally different trajectories towards the end of the season, whereas ever since Mississippi State, Georgia's just really been improving every week, and it doesn't seem like they're going to stop anytime soon. I don't know how they would stop. I don't know why they would end up stopping or what would cause them to, but I don't see that happening. And Alabama, I don't know what game it was that it started, but towards like the last 3 games, you really saw it come into effect. Take away the Eastern Illinois game, they looked pretty bad against Oklahoma, especially offensively, more so than anything. Auburn, they had the 17-0 lead, and then they ended up giving that away. And if Cam Coleman doesn't fumble within that 20-yard line, who knows what that game ends up being, if it ends up being a loss for Alabama or what ends up happening. But they've just skated by a lot these past couple weeks and skated their way into the playoffs, in my opinion. And I just expected Georgia to win, and I didn't expect it to be in this fashion. I didn't expect it to be a blowout like it was. But 2 players I want to touch on for Georgia's offense. Zachariah Branch, as always, he's making crazy plays anytime he gets the chance to. That last touchdown that they had, which I think it was Kirk Herbstreit who called it out on the broadcast, which I ended up looking back later, and it was a really good block. Lawson Lucky taking 2 guys out of the play and giving Zachariah Branch a free running lane. That was the first guy. And then the second one is Gunnar Stockton. Passing yards wise, not very flashy, 156 yards, but he was very, very efficient that game. He made pretty much every right decision that you can make. Didn't put the ball in harm's way too much, and was really reading the field well that game. And I was just very impressed with his play. As in the preseason, I was not very high on him, as there are a lot of quarterbacks I wasn't high on that ended up doing something this year, but he was one of them, and he did amazing against Alabama, and I think he'll continue to do amazing for the rest of the playoff. You're muted.
About on this game is Mike brought it up, and I think it's not sure what's going on here. Okay, shoot.
So I don't know what he was going to bring up at all. But in the meantime, I will give a quick thought on this one game. It's Army-Navy week. Triple option football on both sides. A lot of people think it's a boring game. I kind of like it. I think it's a fun game just to see pretty old offenses that you don't see nowadays at all get played. And to see it from both teams on national scale, I think is really cool. For that game, I'm just making a quick pick for Army-Navy just because I like that game. I'm going to pick Navy, as I always do. I think they're a better team, especially this year. And I think Blake Horvath will have a great day. And I think it'll be a good win for the midshipmen, as I'm hoping for every year.
Yeah, so just to quickly go back to something, because I think my screen froze and everything, but My last thoughts on Alabama, Georgia is related to this question Mike had. I think almost 2.5 weeks ago, I said I was going to take Georgia to win the national title. And Saturday kind of solidified that for me because their defense and special teams basically produced 28 points for them. If you go back and you look at their drive log, I think their longest drive was 59 yards. Um, Three of their scoring drives started in Alabama territory.
Mhm.
When you can do that and when you can run the football, and we know that um, Stockton can make enough throws to win them a game. And quite frankly, I don't know who's going to have success stopping the run against Georgia. Alabama did a decent job. I think they held them to about 3.6 yards, and Georgia still ran it 41 times for 141 yards. Uh, that's just, if you do that, you're going to win a lot of football games because not only are you controlling the clock when you do that, but that's a lot of body blows to take as a defense. That's a lot of times you're getting blocked. That's a lot of times you're getting hit, and eventually you will gash a team doing that. And then defensively, it looks like the Georgia that you kind of think of when you think of Kirby Smart and you think of Glenn Schumann. And so that's my national title pick. I think that leads nicely into the bracket, which we'll talk about really quick. But Clint, do you have a national title pick?
I'm going with you right there. Frankly, ever since the Texas game, and just seeing them replicate that against Georgia Tech, and even though Georgia Tech the score wasn't very flashy at all, um, they still played amazing. And seeing that team go from having, um, I think it was either the or one of the worst pass rushes in the SEC, and
The worst.
yeah, ever since Mississippi State, they hit a switch and they just have been firing on all cylinders ever since on all sides of defense, all facets of it. And I just don't see a team right now that I think is better than them, a team that's more complete than them. And Kirby Smart, he's proven that he can win the big games. He's proven that he's a really good coach. He outcoaches almost everybody he plays. And it's a year when he got over the Bama hump. I'm sorry, I'm not going to go against Kirby Smart when he finally beats Bama. So I'm going to go with him. David seems to agree with us right here. Um, but yeah, that's going to be my natty pick. But if you want to dive into the rest of the bracket, just a little quick preview, we can do that.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this OU Alabama game. We saw this about, I want to say a month ago. I think it might have been November 15th, November 19th.
It was November 15th.
Yeah, it was, and that was a really competitive game. Oklahoma forced three turnovers, including a pick six and a fumble inside of the Alabama 30-yard line. They turned that into, I think, 14 points. Those were, and that kind of pretty much was the game where OU kind of did what Georgia did, where they got a lot of short fields, and that was all they needed to score 23 points. So for Alabama, it's going to be, can you stop turning the ball over and can you win the field position battle? Because it's felt like in their past two losses, it's been really, really lopsided in favor of OU and in favor of Georgia. So that's going to be a really big thing for Alabama is just, can you win the field position battle? And then the other one, Texas A&M versus Miami. It sounds a little weird to say, but it's just which quarterback won't lose their team the game because both of them have a propensity and both of them really do want to give the other team a win. Marcel Reed was terrible against Texas. He was egregiously bad against South Carolina in the first half. He threw two picks against LSU in the first half, right? So this is not a guy who's afraid of, this is not a guy who isn't willing to give the ball to the other team. And Carson Beck, if you want to see him lose his team a game, go watch him against Louisville. It was egregiously bad tape. There's been a lot of games where he's played really poor. He threw a pick against SMU in overtime, and that ended up losing them the game. So these are two quarterbacks that, if you give them the opportunity, they will turn the ball over and they will lose their team a game. So which quarterback cannot do that, or which quarterback can hurt their team the least is the team that'll win, which is a really weird thing to say about two playoff teams.
Yeah. When it comes to the Oklahoma Alabama game, I'm going to go with Oklahoma again. I get it's only been 2 games that they played against each other, but anytime we've seen the Kalen DeBoer and the Brent Venables matchup, Brent Venables just seems to have that offense in a box. He just seems to completely fluster that entire offense, and they force turnovers and they make plays that ultimately help them win the game. I mean, they won that game the same way last year off of 2 interceptions from Jalen Milroe. So they're able to create havoc and they're able to cause Ty Simpson to make stupid errors, which you've seen him this year. Whenever he gets under pressure, that's whenever he ends up looking like he was a backup for 3 years. So I'm going to go with Oklahoma for that game. For Texas A&M Miami, I think I'm going to go with A&M for that one. Granted, yeah, Reed hasn't been the best, especially as of late. But Carson Beck he's patented for having one of those, like, I don't know, like every like half a season, just complete meltdowns. He just every year he just has a couple games where he just plays completely horrible, and you just wonder, and like, not trying to be disrespectful to him, but like how the hell are you playing college football? Um, so Kyle Fields going to be bumping, obviously, like it always is. I think I wish I could have seen that be a night game. That would have been really cool instead of having 2 G5 games in the day and night slot. But either way, they'll show up for that. I think it's going to be super loud, and I think that A&M will come out with a win. I trust A&M's offensive line to hold Miami's D line, which is a very good unit. You need a good old line, like A&M has a lot of experience with it. So I'm going to trust them. I think A&M will win that game, but A&M has the path of doom and despair to make it to the national championship.
Yeah.
They have probably arguably the hardest path of any team to make it. Did want to touch on one question real quick from Posse. Just we can touch on this briefly. What do y'all think of a potential matchup between Indiana and Alabama?
So I actually think that that would be a tougher matchup for Indiana than Oklahoma, because you know that Ty Simpson, especially if you're a team that doesn't pressure a lot, you feel a lot more comfortable with him against teams that are going to drop 7. Um, the thing that has really given Alabama and Simpson a lot of problems the last 4 weeks or 5 weeks, when they went from a stretch of playing LSU, Oklahoma, Auburn, Georgia. The thing that those 4 teams did, like unanimously and unilaterally, was they brought 5 and 6 pretty frequently, and they played man behind it a decent amount. And then when they didn't play man, they played 3 deep, 2 under. They played eyes. They played eyes a lot, and so that's not really something that Indiana does a whole lot of. When they bring 5, it's mostly with fire zones. It's not really with cover 0. They tend to be tight within their fire zones, so they'll more so flood the coverage when they're playing a fire zone. But I don't think that's a matchup where I feel a lot more comfortable for Ty Simpson and the Alabama offense. And so I would feel more comfortable with Alabama there. And then I do think Alabama would be fine in terms of defensively. I think both Indiana and Oklahoma would do a pretty good job of keeping Indiana under 20 points, which hasn't been the hardest feat in the world. Iowa did it. Ohio State obviously did it. So I think both of those teams would hold Indiana under 20. The problem is for OU, they're just so awful offensively, and John Mateer's he's been a jag for basically since he returned. Uh, there's really not anything about that matchup that makes you feel comfortable with John Mateer against Indiana's defense. So I think Alabama's a worse matchup for Indiana. Now, I'm not sure Alabama would win, but I think that's a tougher matchup for Indiana than Oklahoma is.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really have too many thoughts for this game because, frankly, I don't think this is what's going to end up happening. But I guess if this matchup were to happen, I'd probably honestly pick Alabama to win this game. Um, I I don't know why. It's just kind of a gut feeling that I have for this game. There's not really much behind it, to be completely honest.
Yeah, so I think we can kind of uh, we'll end it there, and we're just gonna really quickly touch on the SEC, the All ACC teams. I think Texas got three guys on the first team. It was Michael Taft, Trevor Gooseby, and I'm blanking on the third. I'm
So,
sure.
first team. I gotta pull it up. We got for the all SEC first team. We have Trevor Gooseby, Colin Simmons, and Michael Taft. For the all SEC second team, we have Ryan Wingo, Anthony Hill, Malik Muhammad, and Ryan Niblett at kick and punt returner. And then for the all SEC third team, DJ Campbell made that list. So Texas had a total of 8 guys make the all SEC teams this year. I'm sure we'll see some more possibly in the SEC all freshman teams, maybe. We'll come to see that, but yeah,
Yeah.
congrats to those
Um,
guys.
yeah, I think you'll see Grayson Littleton on the SEC all freshman team. He might end up being a freshman All American. Now, I don't know. I can't definitively say that because there's a lot of really good freshman DBs that have played this year. So, but he'll be for sure be an SEC all freshman guy. It's a really good roster for Texas. They a disappointing season, but a lot of talent on there and a lot of things you can celebrate. But Clint, if you don't have anything else, I think we can. We'll say goodnight to you guys. Please like, subscribe, comment, retweet, do all the different things to help the channel. Follow Clint at NBA Hornboy. Follow me at Pack Talks XO, and have a good night, everyone. Actually, really quick, I'll answer this question because I see it really quick. Thoughts on AJ Halsey and Delane's NFL future? I think Halsey is going to be a day two guy. I like him. I think he fits a lot of what teams want to do at big nickel. He does a lot of the things that you want out of a boundary safety. And then Delane's going to be a first round pick, probably a top 15 pick. Really good impressed man. I think he's I think he'll fit as a press man corner. Now, there's not a whole lot of teams that play just true cover one a lot, but I've seen him enough times as a trap corner, as a cover two corner, that he'll make it work wherever he goes. If he can find a team like Seattle, like Houston, in those molds, I think he'll have a lot of success. I'll wrap it up there. I'm not answering any more questions. Got to get out of here. So, good night, everyone. Like, subscribe, comment, retweet. We really appreciate you guys being here. And we'll be here next Tuesday to break down those